Hello everyone, I'm Sarah, I'm from Seren. It's lovely to see you all here tonight. So, Fatal Solution by Leslie Scase is the book we're all here to celebrate the launch of tonight. Leslie Scase is the author of Fortuna's Deadly Shadow, a crime thriller set in the heyday of Victorian Britain. An advocate of the classic murder mystery genre, he is also a keen historian, which is reflected in the authenticity of his novels. A former civil servant, he was born and educated in South Wales. He's a keen fly fisherman and real ale enthusiast, and now lives in Shrewsbury, close to the Welsh border. He is a member of the Crime Cymru Writers Collective and of the Crime Writers Association. He's given talks on crime and punishment in the late Victorian period, appeared at literary festivals, and been interviewed on radio. His second book, Fatal Solution, came out in May, and we are very excited to hear some extracts from it and a little more about it this evening. So without further ado, I'm going to pass over to Matt.
Right, thanks very much. Just a little bit of housekeeping in addition to what Sarah said. We're going to have a question and answer session at the end. If you have any questions and if you'd like to ask them in person at the end, then please use the reaction button at the bottom, which allows you to put up a hand signal, a hands up. And if we see a hands up, we'll come to you and ask you to unmute and ask a question. If you prefer not to ask it in person, then please feel free to tap your question into the chat function. I've been muted.
Sorry.
You didn't hear me.
Sorry, that was an accident.
Just start again. Okay, where was I at the point I was muted? I was about to say, right, with regards to asking questions and answers, we're going to have a Q&A session at the end. Two methods of asking questions. One is to put your question in the chat function if you prefer to do it that way, and Sarah will ask it on your behalf. Or alternatively, if you'd like to ask the question in person, and you're very free to do so, just use the button at the bottom to put a hand raised, and we'll come to you in turn and ask you to unmute and ask your question. That's really all I wanted to cover. Right, I've been very lucky. I've had a free copy of this sent in the post to me, which was blooming wonderful. And I have to say, and this is no false flattery, Leslie Scase, that this is a lovely, cozy, vicious book. It's like being killed by somebody who puts a warm, controlling arm around your shoulder, slips a cold blade between your ribs and smiles while they put you to death. It's a really, really lovely book. Really good at taking you back to the era, really evocative of the time and the kind of people that were involved. And I haven't finished it, so please don't do any spoilers, because I don't want to know the answer at the end. The book is Fatal Solutions, and as we now know, it's published by Seren Books, who've organised this evening's event. Right, to achieve the accolade of approval that being published is a notable event, even if you do it but once. For Leslie, this is his second success, and we'll hear more about that in a few minutes. Because Leslie follows in the footsteps of some very well-known writers, particularly here in Wales. On Seren Books are the likes of Owen Shears, Alison Leyland, Catherine Stansfield, Iolo Williams, and Jonathan Edwards. As Sarah mentioned, Leslie is a member of our Welsh Crime Writers Collective. He's recently been interviewed on BBC Radio, where he talked about his appearance just earlier this month at Wales's first International Crime Fiction Festival. He was raised in Pontypridd, worked in the Treforest trading estate, and then in Merthyr for a number of years before relocating to Shropshire in 1987. Over the following 30 years, he has spent time working in what is described as incredibly exotic destinations, including Wolverhampton, Birmingham, and Stoke-on-Trent. Leslie is a keen fly fisherman. He's a rail ale enthusiast. Would you like to demonstrate for us? There it is. And he's also, for some reason, supported Ponty Rugby Football Club since the 1970s, which was a time when the team won the Western Mail Championship on no less than 4 occasions. And he's followed the team through the Golden Age when Ponty won the Welsh Cup final in '96 and the Welsh Premier League in '97. He will no doubt be anxiously checking the score of local matches when we finish this evening. Fatal Solution is a historical crime novel featuring the enigmatic Inspector Thomas Chard. In 1896, Chard is investigating the discovery of a body in a burned out workshop when 2 local men are poisoned, one fatally. Is it coincidence or is there a connection? Behind the veneer of a bustling and industrious Victorian Pontypridd, the body count begins to mount as Chard finds himself in a race to find a killer before he or she strikes again. So, Leslie, talking about the book specifically, would it be fair to say that when you read about the Albion colliery disaster in 1894 and the subsequent inquiry, that it provided you with the motivation to write about it?
Not directly. I mean, what happened was I kind of had the the plot for a book, and as you know, there's rivalry between 2 rail companies, and I'm not going to say any spoilers. So I always, this is the snag sometimes when you talk about a book that's a whodunit, you've got to be a bit careful. But I wanted to, I'd realised since writing Fortuna that it was by omission I had missed the Albion colliery disaster. So I had to include that in somewhere because I thought, hell, that only happened a year before with the main action of the previous book. And I started to, to read about it and about the impact it had on the people. And what I did, I know there's been books written about it, but what I did, I wanted to go and find my own way, do my own research. So I went to contemporary newspapers of the period, and what they had to say and what they found at the trial and the inquest and stuff like that. So yeah, so so I wouldn't actually say it's what instigated the book. I already
when you read about what seems to be conspiracy, cover up, nepotism that was going on, did you feel a sense of injustice on the part of the people that were unfairly treated, and maybe that through the medium of fiction you could right a wrong?
No, the truth. I mean, when I say, yeah, I felt everything about it, but I think there's sometimes a temptation, if you're going to write a book, particularly if it involves an issue, to actually make a case about something, a very specific case. And I think that actually belongs to factual writing. I mean, I read a lot of factual history books, an awful lot of them. And I think that's where that belongs. I think if you're telling a story and your principal thing is a whodunit, then it's a whodunit. That's what you're doing. I think there's a danger, and it's the same thing with things like, views on all sorts of things. The moment you start to, put a lot of personal views or spin or what have you into that story, I think, well, no, you should be writing a factual book, not a whodunit. The main thing for me is to entertain with the story.
Apart from the secret you let out just before we started recording, do you like reading crime novels yourself?
Yes, but only of a certain type. I like historical ones. I very, very, very rarely will read a contemporary one. I find them too tense. So I prefer historical ones, and I read a lot of medieval mysteries. And I've got a couple of favorite authors. The thing is, I don't read I don't read as much fiction as I used, as I used to. I do read an awful lot of factual books, partly for research, but other than that, I just really enjoy them.
So do you think that reading reflects in your own writing? Because I mean, as an observation, I would say that Fatal Solution, it's not tense. It is a cozier book than a tense book, but nevertheless, it's still very engaging, and you find yourself drawn into the story. It's not a thriller, is it?
No,
it's not a thriller. It's an investigative. It's fascinating. It's concentrating on personalities and people, but nevertheless, it's. I suppose it's like people when they watch Coronation Street or they like EastEnders. They get drawn in with these characters. They get to know these people, and you think, what's going to happen to them? It's the same kind of cozy feeling. And is that something that you like and something you've tried to put into your own writing?
Yeah, there's a series of books by a writer called Bernard Knight, who's a Welsh writer, an I think ex-forensics, I think. But his medieval books are the Crown of John mysteries. And what I liked about them was the little world he built around the central characters and the supporting characters that were there. And I got really interested in them. And as you say, I had, I mean, my wife and I actually went around Exeter one day when we were down on holidays in Devon, following the little spots in Exeter where the books are set and where the other subsidiary characters lived or worked, you know, because the old streets are still there. So it's kind of that feeling. I mean, I'm not necessarily going to do the same with every book. The subsidiary characters may change, or something different will happen to them, or somebody new will come in. So it's not necessarily going to stay necessarily that cozy. Of course, I know what's happening in the future, but it's yeah. But that was part of the draw.
Now, it's Victorian. Traditionally, well, I say traditionally by habit, it's a genre that so often focuses on the East End of London or Whitechapel, that type of area. You opted for Pontypridd. Why did you go for Ponty?
Well, I went for Ponty because basically my grandparents married there in 1898. I had actually considered, for some reason I was thinking of Stockport. I wanted to take it out of London because I was bought the back teeth of Sherlock Holmes and Jack the Ripper, and I thought surely we can put a Victorian story somewhere else, but set in that same late Victorian period. Remembering that people say Victorian, but actually the difference between the 1840s and the 1890s is the same difference between the 1940s and the 1990s. Massive difference. And so I was looking for somewhere, and I kind of been toyed. I've got their wedding picture up on the wall, and I thought, right, look, I wonder if it could be Pontypridd. And if I'm honest, there's a lot of the town's history I didn't know about, and then I might just have it here. Yes, there's a book. I found a book by a gentleman called Don Powell on Victorian Pontypridd, and I read that, and I thought, oh, this has got something going for it. And of course, it's a town I find easy to describe. And then with the excellent things there, and then I started to do a lot more of my own research on top of that. And that was it. It was smashing. The plot itself, I suppose, for that first, but I could have. I mean, I think all my plots could probably go somewhere. They haven't got to be in Pontypridd, but I thought, well, why not? It's a nice setting, and also, you know, the central character, of course, isn't Welsh. She's from Shropshire, and I thought it was a good way of introducing people into the town and the surroundings by having a stranger coming in. That gives you your excuse to actually explain, well, that's what that is, and that's what that is, and that's what that means.
When you write about Pontypridd, do you you obviously know the area quite well, but do you find yourself going and visiting the place in order to get a feel for it when you're going to actually try to translate those descriptions into words?
I don't necessarily need to, but I do go down there. Yeah, in fact, there's a couple of places where I didn't know about, because of course some of the buildings are, have long gone. Some I remember from my childhood, which have gone, and there's more disappearing now as we speak, but have been knocked down. Yeah, I have been down a few. I go down about 4 times a year anyway.
Will people from the area recognise the town that you describe in a historical novel from what they see nowadays?
The older ones will. I mean, I think others hopefully will stop and think. I mean, the fact of, I mean, I knew there had been a foundry of some kind in Treforest, for example. I never realised, even though that's where I grew up, that there was a massive ironworks there. I knew about the white tips in Treforest, as they're known, sort of thing, which was from something. I never knew there was a steelworks up there. So there's a lot of things that even though I'm from there, I spent the first 25 years up there, that I really didn't know. So yeah, I think people will recognise some parts, and then others, hopefully, they'll think about it.
Yeah, I remember you telling me that you were able to access newspapers and maps of the time that helped you. Yes,
I did. I got Ordnance Survey maps from the period, which was very useful, and also newspapers. I now regularly look at newspapers from the period. Which is some of the which I then build into the talk I do on Victorian crime, and there's some absolutely fascinating cases, that are there, and some just really stick with me because because some of them were never solved, so they're in the bag for future plans.
Yeah, we can make guilty whoever we like. 100 years on. Okay, right, we're going to hear our first reading now, Leslie. I understand you're going to read a section from this book.
Yeah, it's only a short reading. What I thought, there's going to be another one later, but the thing is about this book, as with the earlier one, it's got some humour in it, which is what you're going to get first, and then it also gets quite dark in places. In fact, interestingly, Matt, I know you said, obviously you say it's a bit cozy and then a knife between the ribs. I did have feedback from somebody who's about 19 years of age, and she found it very, very dark. Which,
yes, that's a fair description.
Yeah, so it can be. So what we're going to do, you'll get the first reading, and then perhaps the second reading, you'll see the difference. So this is the first one. Okay, so this is Chard, Inspector Chard, and he's going into the Ivor Arms. So I hope you'll have a bit of a laugh with this, hopefully. Right, Chard walked across the room, hung his hat and coat on the wall hooks, and went to join his friends. And I say, it's just a lot of toffs showing off, argued Dick Jenkins. Well, I'd go and watch it if it was over here, responded Will Horses. It's a good idea, but strictly speaking, they should be doing it naked, contributed Diebuck sagely. Intrigued, Chard went nearer and leant his walking cane against the side of the bar. Riding a bike naked? That would chafe a bit, grimaced Will. And what about naked tennis? You couldn't play properly, all your bits flopping about, do you know? Shuddered Dick. What are you talking about? Interrupted the inspector. Oh, sure, my Mr. Chard, we didn't notice you come in. No, Dick, I can see you're all in deep discussion. Of course, in ancient times, the women did it naked as well, continued Diebucks, not wanting to drop the conversation. Oi, Die! I don't know what you're talking about, but I don't want any filthy conversation here, admonished Gwen, who had come to the counter with Chard's pint of bitter. Just educating my butties, Gwen. Yes, he's getting ready for his teaching job, laughed Will. I've only put in for it, hopefully I won't get it, snapped Di. It's them Olympic Games, see, clarified Dick. In April it is, over in Greece. Aye, Gwen. They're even going to run from the town of Marathon to Athens, and that's about 25 miles, added Will. Why? Haven't they got any omnibuses? Asked the landlady. No, you don't get it. They're going to race 25 miles, explained Will. Why would they do that? Quite right, agreed Dick. I mean, if you were being chased by a wild bear or a lion or a tiger, contributed Di, Yes, or a tiger, as you say, continue, Dick. You'd either be caught after half a mile or give up. Daft foreign idea, it'll never catch on, said Gwen. That's it.
I'd like to applaud. It doesn't work terribly well through this medium, does it? Yeah. Okay, right, let's talk about the character, Inspector Thomas Chard. Yeah. Where does he come from and how did he end up in Pontypridd?
See, I can't tell you that because that's in the third book. All I can say is that something happened in his previous job in Shrewsbury, and it was decided that it'd be better off going somewhere else. Now, very deliberately, it's a case of you don't really know yet. I think when people do know, it'll come as a shock. Yeah, so he's just come down, and he's not sure how long he's going to stay in Pontypridd.
What's he like as a character then?
He's somebody,
a person.
He wants to do well, but he also, you know, he's got the common touch. He relatively wants a quiet life. He's not hugely ambitious. He just wants to sort of get on, enjoy his beer, enjoy his work. He likes investigating. He doesn't like admin, hates wearing a uniform, which of course his superintendent insists he must wear. And that's him really. He's obviously made a few friends, which are the people he was talking to, which the superintendent wouldn't necessarily approve of. And that's it really.
You made him English though. An Englishman in Victorian, deepest, darkest Wales.
Yeah, I wanted to make him a bit of an outsider. Having decided on the place, I thought, right, I've got to. How do I introduce somebody to this world who's not familiar with South Wales? And I want the central character to kind of be put a bit out of step. So, you know, because if you have somebody who's swanning in and you know they're immediately in charge of the situation, you don't get any form of conflict. But if you've got somebody coming in who is an outsider and can take the reader with them, you know, I thought that would be a good idea.
I noticed that as you did with the first book, that you continue to drop snippets of Welsh into the narrative. Was that a deliberate move?
Yeah, it was. Well, the thing is that yeah, I mean, again, if you go into Pontypridd now, down in South Wales now, we still, I mean, I speak very little Welsh, but you will still you'll go into a bar in you might go in the Land of Our Arms and you'll say Shwmae to somebody, and we don't. Most of the people that I grew up with, you're quite capable of pronouncing Welsh even if you can't speak it, and you use some Welsh terms without consciously recognizing you're speaking Welsh. I mean, I obviously I don't do it so much now. I live in England, but certainly when I lived in Pontypridd, it'd be quite normal for me to say, you know, oh, what a tig, fair play. And I would just say what a tig, and I wouldn't necessarily register that I'm speaking any other language than what I normally speak. It's part of the normal thing. The other thing was, of course, back then, the use of Welsh was dying out. But it was still in use, and some families still used it, you know, in normal family life. I mean, there was obviously there was the attempt in schools to drive it out. That's something for a future book, but it's I think it'd been wrong to have left it out entirely, and also again, it's something else to put the inspector on the back foot.
What if I could comment, as opposed to ask a question, what I liked about it is when you do slip the Welsh in, it's immediately apparent from the dialogue what the expression means. So in a way, as an English reader, you're reading it and you're learning parts of the language as you go through.
Yeah, that was very deliberate. I did want to make it absolutely clear, as you say, from the dialogue, that you know what they were saying. So if Gwen says to Chard, you know, I'll give me a cwtch, and then she puts her arm around him, you immediately know what a cwtch is. Yes, you're right.
One character says to another Bore da, and the other one says good morning to you too.
Yeah.
Instant. It sounds so natural, and yet you've learnt in an instant what the expression means.
Yeah,
that's great. Everyone's familiar with crime stories, whether through literature or television. Did you, during your research, did you come across any aspects or types of policing in Victorian Pontypridd that you found surprising?
Yes and no. Well, the one bit specific, which hasn't, again, I've got to keep saying I've got loads of future ideas, but it's a bit later, actually, just a few years later. I think it's in about 1901. But you had the then superintendent actually having the police giving them bayonet practice in the yard, which I thought was, unusual. But there'd been a lot of industrial unrest. The troops were not only brought in. I mean, people know about the ones in the early 20th century, but troops have been fetched in 1893 and 1898 as well. So, yeah. In terms of Victorian policing generally, yes. I mean, what I found was that in the structure of policing, at that time, you had, so for example, you had H Division that looked for Jack the Ripper, right? I've got a photograph of them I use in my slides. And there's about 60, policemen in H Division. Haverfordwest Borough Constabulary consisted of 6 men. And so what you had is that you would have county constabulary, but an individual town might decide, no, we don't want to be part of it. We've got our own constabulary. So, for example, you had Cardiff Borough Constabulary. Now, on top of that, the railways had their own police. So the Great Western Railway had police. The Glamorganshire Canal had police of their own. And they dealt with things that related to that. So, for example, the canal police dealt with thefts from stuff from the barges or navvies fighting, and that was their regime, which kept the pressure off the town police. So it was quite confusing. Also, another little tidbit as well, which I've never seen on film, is that in the summer some police forces had white helmets, a bit like on Rorke's Drift. So Swansea, Tenby, Shrewsbury. So yeah, that's about it, I think.
A bit more comfortable than shirt sleeve order. But there were no detectives.
Well, there were, but not every force. Not at the time of the current book. Things will change. But London had them early. Manchester had them early. By the time of the books I'm writing, Nottingham had them. Shrewsbury had them, but it wasn't universal. So you will find that things will change in the Glamorgan Constabulary, but they were somewhat a little bit slower. But they were there.
So what other aspects of Victorian life did you have to research?
Well, things, for example, I know this sounds really, really simple thing, but you can very easily overlook it. Food. We're so used to having food, like, all through the year. I've got a list of what's in season and what isn't, because that's an absolute classic. When people are eating leeks in August and things like that. So that's one of the things. The types of transport that was used. That's important. The type of clothes, the lighting. Sort of thing. Electricity was not in the majority of houses. There were very, very few exceptions. How the medical arrangements. So of course, because obviously quite a setting for first two books actually is the infirmary in the workhouse. Now I have slightly, they had an infirmary in the workhouse inside the main building. It was a very large workhouse. The separate infirmary block actually came in 1900. But I've just fetched it forward a few years because it just made it easier for the story.
If I've been reading recently about a utopian idea for society, where if everything was within 15 minutes of where we lived, that we would have no need for fossil burning fuel cars and things like that, and everything would be far more likely to be carbon neutral, as is the modern expression. In the Victorian times, did they actually have that cracked at that point?
That's a good. Well, not really from the point of view of carbon, because of course everything was running on coal.
Yeah.
So,
but in terms of facilities, they didn't have cars like they had. We didn't have access to trains and buses and things like that. So was everything within 15 minutes of their homes?
Well, no. Let's knock that on the head. I mean, first of all, they had better access to trains than we've got now. So that's the first thing. The second thing is they didn't have. I mean, Pontypridd at the time, and actually going to the 1960s, you had people travelling to Pontypridd Market and the town as a shopping centre from Aberdeen, from Merthyr, from Cardiff. They even had people coming from Bristol to go to Pontypridd Market. So people did travel distances to markets. In terms of work, no, you're right. Everything was there, but then you also had a lot of transport of things from. So you had, for instance, you had the iron ore would be come down from the Cyfarthfa works, and that would travel all the way down to Treforest, and then some stuff, I can't remember how they make tin now, I did look into it at the time, would go down to the tin plate works. And so you had various materials going everywhere. It was very busy from the point of view of traffic. So no, I don't. I mean, other than the fact of the motor car, I don't think it's made a huge amount of difference. So no, I don't think that it cracked from carbon neutral. No.
Okay, Leslie, before we do the next reading, we've heard a lot about the basis behind the book, about you, about the society, the background to the novel. What's the story?
Hey? Oh. Right, okay, so you basically want me to describe the plot without actually telling you they've given anything away.
A challenge for any author. Tell us the story without giving it away.
All right, okay. So it revolves, I suppose, really around two things, which may or actually may not be connected in any way, shape or form. You've got a man who's found burnt to death in a workshop in the village, but it's almost like a mini town in Kilvennith. And that's a part of Pontypridd that's still sort of staggering, coming to terms with the tragic loss from the mining disaster. So that's an investigation for Chard there. As a separate thing, this rivalry between two railway companies. Now, what is difficult to get across is the fact that I mentioned the Taff Vale Railway and the Barry Railway, and you think, well, okay, this rivalry between these, these penny halfpenny things, they weren't. If you think about it, you had something like 20% of the world's industrial fuel going through the South Wales valleys, right? And the contract to basically supply and move all this tons and tons and tons of very, very costly fuel fell in the hands of initially the Taff Vale Railway, which virtually had a monopoly. And then you had the Barry Railway, which built its own docks and then pushed its way into the rail network and started to take the business. So there's an enormous amount of money involved. And now I've very deliberately the rivalry was there. That's absolutely real. There's no thing. The fact that they then went and built their own railway station in Pontypridd, which I didn't know existed, but it certainly did, and was opened as it says in the book. So that was absolutely spot on. I mean, I have deliberately manufactured entirely the people that actually run those railway companies purely for the purposes of fiction and enjoyment. Yeah, so there's an amount of industrial espionage, and you've got 2 people in the town are found collapsed on a park bench, yeah, and it's a case of nobody knows, you know, what is it? Is it poison? Is it some kind of disease? Has the typhoid come back? And that's where the mystery comes from. He's basically dealing with 2 different things, and that's as much as I'm going to say.
Right. So, as a writer, are you a planner or a seat of the pants creator? For example, when you started the story, did you know how it was going to end?
Yes and no. I plan it out so that stage by stage. So I kind of get the start and I kind of get the end. Now the thing is, I know, though I've got my path, I actually write very slowly, very deliberately. I never write more than 4 pages at a time. And the reason for that is, I know some people just go straight through it and then reread it, rewrite it, and rewrite it, and rewrite it. And I can't work like that. But I continually think about what's happening. I try and get inside the heads of the people. And I may get to a stage where I think, actually, I don't think it's going to be that person. I may actually change the ending, but I've certainly got the concept of what's going to happen. I may last minute just change out who the guilty party is.
Have you ever killed anybody off and regretted it?
No.
Have you ever brought anyone back to life?
Not yet. Not yet. No. I'm quite happy. I think if there's anything that I would like to. I'm not older, but you see, the thing is, quite by chance, there was a Superintendent Jones, and I actually like the guy. I really do, and I don't think he's that bad a chap. You know, people say, oh, you know, well, he's a bit bumbling and he interferes, and I think, actually, no, I quite like him. I think he's a good bloke. So I think I need to. I want to big him up a bit. So there we are. I feel he's a bit unfairly regarded, perhaps, but I don't know.
Good. Okay, right. We're going to do the second reading now. What are you going to read to us, Leslie?
Right. Well, this bit it doesn't give anything away. I not too much. What I want you to see it in a way is the difference, because you've had the first reading. This one, you'll obviously notice will be quite different. So here we go. Yesy, Maur! Open this door, you daft bitch! Yelled the landlord of the Boot Inn. He had helped himself to his own dubious supply of spirits after the last customer had left and awoken some time later. Despite the alcohol consumed, he knew what he wanted, a damn good shag. Marion! He yelled as he hammered on the internal door to your room. You owe me for your gin and I'm giving you the chance to pay it off. Let me in. There was no reply. If you don't let me in, I'll break the bloody door down, then you'll have to pay for it, he threatened. Still no reply. The landlord staggered drunkenly back down the stairs and into the bar, where he picked up the heavy wooden mallet used for tapping the barrels. Right, you asked for it, he proclaimed to the empty room. Barely managing to climb back up the stairs, the landlord leaned against Marion's door. Aiming at the lock, he swung the mallet as hard as he could. The blow missed the lock itself, but it was good enough to shatter the rotting wood of the adjoining door frame. Losing his balance, the landlord fell against the door and it swung open, causing him to fall on the floor. Struggling to his knees and then onto his feet, he saw Marion lying naked on the bed. "Sleeping, are you? Well, I'll wake you up," he shouted, unbuttoning his trousers. Losing his balance once more, the landlord's hand rested on Marion's leg to steady himself. It felt cold, and something made him withdraw it quickly. "Marion? Marion Cariad? Are you all right, love?" he asked, concerned despite his drunkenness. He looked at her staring eyes. Then the shock hit him, and he began to cry. There you are.
Your round of applause will have to be again, just me. Fantastic. Final question from me, Leslie. The title, Fatal Solution, where did that come from?
Well, I mean, as a crime writer yourself, you should know that if you take the words kill, murder, fatal, and just about anything else, and
Dead.
mix dead, that's a good one, and you try and put it, somebody's already got the title. Now, apart from somebody writing one about the Holocaust, there's no clear, there's nothing else, and you're not going to mix it up. So, but also, you know, obviously, solution is handy because the inspector can refer to a solution. So there we are. So yeah, that's it. He was lucky it worked, and it was just an easy one to fit in.
Did the title change in the writing of the novel, or did it stick with it?
Not at all. No, it stayed all the way through. I tend to give my books code words till I'm happy with the titles, but once I've got the title, that's it.
Okay, right. Well, we're going to move on to questions and answers now. But before that, here's an amusing comment from Mark Salter. Mark says, "You were never cut out to be a children's author, that's for sure."
Yes, he should know. He went to school with me.
Yeah, certainly the subject matter wouldn't be too conducive. Anyway,
No.
Right. Okay. Has anybody mastered how to use the raising of the hands on the chat function? Does anybody would like to answer a question? Just adjusting my screen here so I can see everybody.
I think Philip Jones might have a question.
Here we go. Right, we've got one from Philip. Right, Philip, if you'd like to unmute.
That's it.
Great. Thanks so much, Leslie. Thoroughly enjoyed this. I was a student at the old Polytechnic of Wales, as it was called, and I live up the Graig in Pontypridd, and I have very, very happy memories of it, and of a place called Fernando's Wine Bar. And if you can imagine,
I went there.
yeah, did you? Oh my goodness! Oh, can you imagine a place less likely to have Fernando's Wine Bar than Pontypridd? But I mean, it was fantastic. Yes. But my question to you was actually going to be, I mean, I was there really just after the miners' strike in the 1980s.
Right.
Pontypridd, in your period, what would it have been like in terms of population, in terms of wealth, in terms of, you know, the prosperity of the population and such like?
The population at the time was about 35,000.
Right, so probably about the same then, but yeah.
I think it's more than that now, but
right.
But what you've got to remember is there was a lot more work there, so there's a lot of more people travelling in because you had a mill, as in Mill Street. You also had a mill in the town. You had about 4 mines around the town. You had a steelworks in Treforest. You had an ironworks in Treforest. You had the New Bridge chain works, which is Brown and Lennox, works there as well. So it was a hive of industry. Then you had the people working on the railways, which was a big employer as well. So you had a lot of people working there. And the other thing is, as people who you know grew up there and remember it from their childhood in the 1960s, the number of people that used to flood into the town on a market day was absolutely phenomenal. It was, you would be squeezing through past people, you know. I mean, I've been in the Saturday since, and no, you're fine. You could ride a couple of cart horses side by side through the main market street, but you certainly couldn't back then. It was a much different place. And in terms of wealth, again, it's you were starting at that time. There was, I don't want to go at the economics, I'll bore you silly, but it was something called the Long Depression. But things were starting to go downhill. But if you had work, and regular work, and around Pontypridd was probably wealthier than further up the valley.
Mm. Thanks. That's fascinating stuff. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Right. Next question, I think, comes from Michael at Grumpy Old Books. Michael, welcome. You'd like to unmute and fire away.
Hello?
Hello, I can hear.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Me? Lovely
Yeah.
job.
Yeah.
Yeah, just to say, I was given a copy of the book by Sarah, and I'm from the same background as Leslie, and it really resonated with me. I thought it was an excellent book. My whole family's in mining. At a young age, I went down a colliery myself, and I remember looking up and seeing that little white hole getting smaller and smaller. At one point in the book, Leslie describes exactly that I was feeling nearly 100 years later, and I thought that was just exceptionally how we managed to do that. Did you have any experience of working down a mine yourself, Leslie?
I didn't, but my father was 50 when I was born. So, which is why, for example, you know, obviously my grandfather was married in 1998 and all that. But my father was sent down the pit at the age of 14 till the age of 21. And he subsequently, I mean, he suffered with chest problems all his life. The army, of course, wonderfully classified him as A1, and he served in Africa. And then, you know, of course, he had terrible trouble. And of course, wonderfully, as you will be aware, the coal board deferred its compensation payments for dust for as long as they possibly could, till as many people died off as happened, and that's what happened with my dad. So you know, I've got a lot of empathy, you know, sort of thing with the miners. So yeah, so I wanted to do that justice, particularly after reading about the disaster. I had to say I didn't mention it at all in the first book, and I thought I got to put that right.
Thank you, Zara. Excellent.
Okay. Sarah, I can't see any more questions on the chat function. Have you got any more that have come in at all?
Oh, here's another one. Is this also from Michael? Do you want to ask another one? You can if you want to. Otherwise, I'll move on. We had one come.
Yeah, just sorry. Earlier on, Leslie said modern contemporary novels are too tense. Why does he find modern novels tense and historical ones less tense?
Only because you've got that slight distance. You know, I mean, I know that if I read, I'm reading a very good modern novel at the moment, but I won't say which one it is. But you can see Matt smiling. But the thing is that you could, in theory, be blown up by a terrorist bomb if you go to Belfast or anywhere like that. Some of these things could happen to you on a day-to-day business. We know there's modern serial killers, this, that, and the other. I just find it's a, you know, because, you know, I mainly read medieval crime books. I don't think necessarily somebody's going to, you know, fire a crossbow bolt at me from, well, I'm sorry, I shouldn't say that, the war in Anglesey, but a longbow shot. I don't think I'll get an arrow in the chest. You know, so it's not likely when I'm wandering through Shrewsbury. So so there we are. I think it's just that having that distance.
Okay, thanks, Michael. Thank you. Right, I'm not picking any more questions up in chat now. I think we just got one final one from email for Sarah.
Yes, so someone asked on email, what's different about this book from the first one, Fortuna's Deadly Shadow?
Right, okay. What I would say is the main thing is that one or two. The main thing is that we find out more about Inspector Child. We find out more about his background. That was very deliberate. I didn't want to reveal too much about it in the first book. You'll learn more about him in the second book, and there is a love interest. All will be revealed in the third book. So you got the development of Chard there. Also, amongst the subsidiary characters, there's a character, May Roper, appeared in the first book. Things will have changed slightly, though she doesn't play a big part in the second book. Things have changed in relation to herself. So that's quite interesting. And Chard starts to get a little bit more of another sidekick sort of thing. So yeah, so it's just moving on. But I am trying to keep the books almost like individual stories, and I want them all in my head to be a little bit different every time. So there we go.
Leslie, would you say it's useful to read Fortuna's Deadly Shadow before Faithless Selection?
Yeah, I think it's useful. It's not essential.
Yeah,
but
I think that would be. I'd agree with that. It would help slightly, but not essential. I agree. Yeah.
It's not essential, but I think you know, I mean, I think if it was me, because you know, if I did just pick up this one, I would want to go and read the first one, because you will have a hint that things have happened before, but I deliberately, again, don't give away what happened in the first book, so that if somebody does want to go back and read it, they'll enjoy it, you know, as a separate entity.
I mean, another good thing about it, and I'll ask you whether this was a deliberate move, was the fact that they're set in such particular different time scales that there's no overlap. So you don't need to have learned the background in the first story to empathise with the character and follow the story in the second story. So was that a deliberate move to set a quite a time span between the two? It's a couple of years, I think, isn't it?
Well, hang on, let me think. I've got to bear with a second. I get confused because don't forget I've kind of written ahead. So we've got the first book. You've got a prologue in 1893, and then Chard turns up in 1895. In the second book, the prologue is actually 84, but then the story is in 96. So kind of, but you don't need to. No, you haven't got any problems with it as far as I'm aware. You should be able to just pick up the one book and not a problem.
Right, well, I think we've got to the end of the questions, into the written questions, into the verbal questions. So really, at this point, it's just for us to say thank you, Leslie. Thank you for your time. Thank you for writing the book. I think those of us that write absolutely know the tortuous labour of love that goes into producing a book. When I listen to these students moaning about producing their 2,000-word dissertations, and I think to myself, if only. Tremendous. Thank you for your insight into Victorian times. Thank you for your insight as to what policing was like in that world. As everyone will now know, it's out there. Get it bought. You'll thoroughly enjoy it, believe me. But whatever you do, please don't tell me the ending, because I haven't found out yet. So I'm now going to hand you back to Sarah.
Thank you very much. I'm actually going to hand over to Mick, who is my colleague from Seren. He's just going to say a few words as well.
Okay, I think I'm unmuted. Just want to say sorry for getting here late. A few family things to deal with, unfortunately. So, I mean, yeah, just delighted that, Leslie, in the end, did choose Seren to be his publisher. And that you know, it's been a great joy to work on the book with him, and we're looking forward to hopefully working on the next two. And I think you probably gathered from tonight that Fatal Solution's full of really good characters who are agents for Leslie's terrific plotting. I don't think we've said enough perhaps tonight about what a good plotter Leslie is. And it's a great story. It's full of murder and industrial espionage. There's a love story going on, as Leslie says, and it's got Victorian Pontypridd off to a T. It's authentic and it's engaging, and I'm sure there's going to be Inspector Chard tours around the town soon, and I'm sure Leslie's going to be leading them. So I'm just going to end by urging you to go to the Seren website and buy the book and enjoy reading about the redoubtable Inspector Charged and his fellow officers. Thanks very much to Matt for hosting the evening so wonderfully tonight. And thanks to everyone for coming along, and I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope you enjoyed the books. Thanks very much.